Perfect. All right, Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott, back again for another episode of the Nolecast, back for another position preview episode of the Nolecast. Tonight will be the defensive line, the entirety of the defensive line, defensive ends, tackles, and some of them tweeners even there. So, Bud, look forward to jumping into it. As always, we want to thank our sponsors, Legendary Home Loans, Congruity, HR Solutions, and the great team at Madison Social for the Table Restaurant Group. And the website, not to forget, there is LaborDayTailgate.com. Bud, let's talk about some defensive linemen. This will be a fun preview. Pretty consistent theme that we've enjoyed doing almost all of these, just the fans in us, because hey, there's a lot of good players on this roster. But this one will be interesting to look at, and two areas with kind of unique strengths. And yeah, man, let's do it. Let's jump into this defensive line preview.
Let's do this thing. So I want to go over some numbers with you, if you allow me, and I want to just sort of kind of set the groundwork for where you were last year and where we're going into. I'm going to read you some numbers. Derek McClendon, 509 snaps last year. Robert Cooper, 385. Malcolm Ray, 333. Leonard Warner, 293. Again, these are defensive only, so not including special teams. Jarrett Jackson, 156. And then, you got guys that play just in garbage time. I mean, Robert Cooper was a great Seminole, right? And went through like a lot and played through a lot of injury last year.
Didn't he just get re-signed by the Seahawks again? That, if you
so.
remember, when we were doing our draft preview, I had mentioned that I had lunch with a couple current players, and they had mentioned that the Seahawks were particularly keen on Cooper and that might be a scheme that he could fit in. So good to see that. To your point, a player, particularly after injury last year, that was very, very limited.
100%. And then, we look at the preview magazines. What are they going to tell us? They're going to say, hey, Jared Verse. Jared Verse is a stud. There's no doubt about it. Jared Verse, 386 snaps last year. Jared Verse, 386. Robert Cooper, 385. Your top defensive guy on the defensive line was McClendon at 509. I know they like to rotate a lot, particularly Odell, but last year you had a lot of guys playing who were just not, particularly high-level players. You also played Dennis Briggs 375 snaps, right? And Dennis Briggs was just not back to the player that he was in 2021 before he got cheap-shotted did we figure out if is it Notre Dame or Louisville? I'm trying to remember. I was in the box for this.
I thought it was Louisville, but
okay,
hard to remember.
So, look, last year's D-line had some really good moments. I thought they stood up pretty well against LSU. They actually stood up kind of well against NC State at times, right? And then at times not. And, I mean, obviously they destroyed Miami. They destroyed a bunch of offenses that were not particularly great, and situationally not particularly great. But there were some times as well in which the defensive line was not impactful, or at least not in a positive way. Florida at times was able to do things to them. Wake Forest was not significantly impacted by this defensive line. Oklahoma, despite missing multiple draft pick starters, was really rather unfazed by this D-line. So I do think that if you're betting on defensive improvement this year, and I am, I think most of it comes not from a new scheme, because we've talked about this, not from a whole bunch of new starters in other positions. I think it's because you believe that your defensive line finds a way to eat. They got to stay healthy, obviously, because you don't want to play, 12 guys, 300 plus snaps, or 10 guys, 300 plus snaps. But I think there's a lot of room for improvement, man. And to me, it starts at the top of Verse taking another step, Verse showing why he came back to school, and Verse giving you 500 snaps of dominant play. Maybe only 450 if you blow out as many people as I think you're going to blow out. That's where, to me, this really has to start. Like, I do think he has the ability to impact the game much more than he did actually on the field in 2022. And he had a nice year last year, but I do think there's another gear there. Like he had 16 and a half tackles for loss, 12 run stops. Can he get more sacks, right? He had 9. Can Jared Verse give you like a 13, 14 sack year? Can he give you, a sack a game in your 6 biggest games to where, sacks and drives? Stats wise, a pro tip, by the way, if you happen to be live betting games from a stadium, like if you're sitting in the stands, if you see a sack, just bet the exact drive outcome punt because it's pretty much locked in. I'm just super excited to see Verse this year, dude. If he can take his game to another level, it really becomes problematic for opposing offenses.
If Jared Verse plays 420, 425 snaps this year or more, it's hard not to see this defense being pretty damn elite, in my opinion. I mean, I think I don't know. We can talk about Daryl Jackson in a second. I don't know that there's an absolute ready-made superstar on the interior. I think there's a bunch of 7.5s, 8.5s. I think they're really solid players that are going to flash. But man, if Verse is healthy and Verse is making the offense entirely reshape what they're doing on that side of the ball as far as pass protection and keeping in a tight end, whatever the ramifications of a dominant Jared Verse would be. Man, look, there's other things going on. It's not that simple, but sometimes it is that simple. And if you've got a first round defensive end, a kid who's legitimately has the potential to be one of the first 15 or 12 picks in the draft, and he's healthy, and he looks like the guy that he's looked like at camp, a Verse that's put on another 8 or 9 pounds and is just as fluid and fluid and fluent and letting everybody know how fluid and dominant he's been, then this defense you can be really optimistic. You can be excited. Again, we'll go through individual position previews, but you can think that maybe some of that zone eyes and some of the more aggressive work in the secondary that's going on is going to lead to more turnovers. I mean, you can think that the linebackers that you have, while limited in the initial numbers that you have, can play and run, and it all starts up here. And if Verse is healthy, and if Verse looks like the LSU Verse that we saw last year for 8 or 9 games, then this defense is going to be pretty damn fun to watch. Absolutely.
Totally. And especially, look, how about the number 250? If he gives you 250 snaps against LSU, Clemson, Florida, Miami, and at Pitt, I think that that's really the key number. Those are the 5 games that I think right now you need him in,
yeah.
Right? He's got to be big time impact in those big time games. But I think it's in him. We're not big on sugarcoating stuff here on this pod. I do think that is legitimately in him. I do think he has a chance to get into the first round, and maybe he could be a top half of the first round guy with a big time season. I think he's going to test very well. So if you got the production and you got the testing, and you got the attitude and work ethic, and
he'll test very well. He's not going to run like a 4.54 or something. He's not going to run some 40 that's going to make you turn, but he'll run a respectable 40. Everything else will be very, very impressive. The dude is going to interview through the roof. I mean, there will be GMs that talk to Jared Verse and are more than comfortable putting a first round investment into him. So he's got a lot of things going for him, definitely. So if you move on from there, we can talk about some of the other rotational pieces at the defensive end. Pat Payton is certainly your assumed other starter. Pat Payton, the ACC Rookie Defensive Player of the Year.
Hey, don't go breaking practice and reporting rules now. We're assuming that the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year is a starter.
Well, yes, I am assuming that, and I would
the guy who
look
had
for my
one
expectations to be made true. I'll put it that way. Yeah,
I'm super excited about him, dude.
He is a dynamic player. I don't know how he's quite as impactful as he is at the weight that he is. I mean, not that he's tiny, but he's really long.
Kind of Brian Burnsy.
Yeah, kind of, without the super rocket and the get off step, but long, plays with a lot of with a lot of angle manipulation, I guess, as far as some of the stuff you can do with tackles and their hands. And I think he is a very impressive player who looks to have maybe a good year. And look, this is probably the this is probably the NIL in me. Looks to have a great year, and let's hope he has a true breakout year in 24. I think Pat Payton could be a very, very solid player this year. I think he could come back in 24 and truly launch himself somewhat into the discussion that we were having similar with Jared. I don't know if he's quite a top 10, top 12 type guy at the full edge of the spectrum, but he may well be. And it'd just be interesting to see how that body and that frame matures over time.
So we mentioned FSU's top defensive end, or top defensive end last year, played 509 snaps. Their top reserve played 625 snaps for South Carolina. I think that says something, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, Gilbert Edmond is arguably your top backup defensive end. And I think he'll play quite a bit, especially against the run. And he's still learning to play. Like, he's kind of got the not the baby deer thing going on, but like he's an impactful guy in some ways. He did have 10 tackles for loss last year. The havoc numbers aren't great. The pressure numbers are okay. He had a couple run stops, but athletically, physically, he's kind of what you're looking for. To be able to roll it out there as a backup, he's certainly not going to get overwhelmed physically by anybody. He might get beat on technique some, just because he is, for a guy who played that many snaps, he is definitely somewhat raw, but a very potentially valuable piece to have with this lineup. I think for him, getting more pass rush moves or just getting better at the ones that he does like will be really key. But man, that is a big time thing. Last year, your best reserve D end, who actually played the most snaps for you, by the way, was McClendon. I think Edmond is potentially as good as McClendon was, right? And I hope that Gilbert Edmond does not play the most snaps out of anybody on this defensive line this year.
Yeah, that would be interesting. A guy who does have a significant amount of experience, as you said. Also, a guy who's already kind of transformed his body just since being here. Looks, doesn't look a totally different player. That's dumb hyperbole, but you can tell where he's put on good weight in his midsection and continues to grow. And you're right, that is a 600 snaps in the SEC is a hell of a portfolio with which to build off of, and that'll be interesting to see what he looks like and kind of as he evolves throughout the season.
I did see South Carolina took a defensive end from UAB today, so
Okay.
a late graduate transfer, I guess. Look, other defensive ends to know about. Byron Turner could be interesting, right? Like I think he's kind of got something to him, and definitely down the line, like, he's been banged up so much throughout his career. Like, if he ever puts together a healthy streak, it wouldn't shock me if he ends up being a good player for you, right? We'll see on some of the young guys as far as how much they get to play, how impactful they can be. Dante Anderson was a walk-on. People ask us a lot about. So I think he'll probably get into the rotation some. And just realistically, given what you have on this football team and who you face, I think you also probably will play a lot of mixed front stuff, right? Because you do have a piece that we should talk about here, unless you have any more on the defensive end stuff, shifting in to two guys who are sort of transitional type guys, right? And that is Dennis Briggs and Braden Fisk.
Mm-hmm.
Different body types, but certainly two guys who allow you to play a variety of fronts, I think, if you want to do so. I actually did pull this up from my friends at StatsBomb. That's a company. Most of their stuff's not really public right now, but I do know it's a really exciting data company that I geek out on far too often. But
Okay.
did you know that Fisk played almost half of his snaps last year, 48%, from between the 5 tech and the 9 tech? So 5 tech being your classic 3-down DN, 9 tech being like your wide 9 defensive end, kind of like what Wake ran against FSU. That shows a lot of versatility. Now, granted, he's in the MAC, so I think his speed probably plays a little bit better in the MAC than it does in Tallahassee. But this guy was very productive. 11 tackles for loss, 13 run stops, havoc rate of 2.2%, which is fine. 6%, 6 sacks, 8% pressure rate. Now, Jared Verse last year, when healthy, 16% pressure rate, which is just stupid good. I know you could tell me some of it was against bad competition. I get that, but still 16% is huge. It's not like it's on 10 snaps. It's on, almost 400. And yet I kind of think Fisk might have another level to his game if he's not constantly being double teamed. Because what I was able to find is he was double teamed on well over half of his snaps. And Western Michigan did have a couple other good players on that front, by the way. But Fisk, in my opinion, was the best of them. And people definitely dedicated quite a bit of interest to him in terms of blocking. So, we talk about this defensive front and need to get a better pass rush from it. And you just, based off the last 2 years, Adam Fuller seems to want to play a lot of explosive denial defense, where you're playing a lot of two shell stuff. You're allowing the ball to be thrown underneath, rally tackle, get up, do it again, use your size in the red zone type stuff. Well, if you're going to do that and you're not going to blitz a whole lot, and I'm not advocating that they blitz a ton more. Some more creativity, I think, with such a veteran defense should be expected and demanded, I would say, because you should be able to do more things with basically everybody back off last year's defense. However, Fisk is a dude I think is a versatile piece that allows you to do that. Like, he can line up next to Lovett as a traditional, defensive tackle, inside type guy. If you want to shift into some 3-down stuff, he's also, given that he played almost half his snaps at Western in doing this, he also can sit there and play a 5 pretty well. So I'm excited to see what this transfer can do. I really am.
No, man, Fisk is fun. I mean, I think I mentioned this in a prior episode. When I do get fortunate enough to be able to go to practice, I try to make myself watch at least 10 to 15 to 20 snaps right on the line of scrimmage and just stare at the line of scrimmage and don't ball watch. Otherwise you'll see, oh, look at the 9-yard gain. Don't know what happened. It's great to be able to turn around and look at the screen and you can get a little better idea as to who was trying to block who, etc. But no, I love just getting parallel with the line of scrimmage and looking out over it. And when you do, you will notice that Braden Fisk is the first helmet to move on damn near every snap. I mean, it is, yeah, haha, he's a white guy, haha, he's sneaky athletic, whatever. Dude, this guy's twitch will shock you. It will be very surprising. He is, he's not Peter Boulware or something like that, but he is very, very impressive with how he responds to the ball being snapped. The violence that comes with his hands. He's a ball player. I mean, it's going to be an awful lot of fun to look at how this guy works into the system, how he becomes acclimated with a little bit higher level of ball. No better way to do that than against LSU. LSU offensive line is pretty freaking good, by the way. Yeah. So if Fisk comes out and really shines in game 1, then hey, you might really, really have something special. I'm very, of the 5 guys who I just can't wait to see what it looks like, Fisk is probably number 3 or number 4 on that list for me. He's quite the talent.
Also a super fun recruiting story. He was 6'3", 240 in high school and projected to end up as an offensive guard. Turns out he kept his twitch despite putting on 65 pounds. So that's not really normal. Most of us who put on 65 pounds after high school do not keep our twitch. Personally,
I'll have to go play some pickup basketball to confirm to you, bud, that I have not, in fact, kept my twitch. Fisk is impressive.
So also he can take a heavy workload. I mean, last year, knock on wood, 681 snaps on the defensive side of the ball. I know a guy who's not happy to see him in the ACC. His name probably is Pat Narduzzi, because Pitt played Western last year, and granted, like Pitt beat them obviously, but that's not a guy you love facing, especially because you really are not going to double him if Jared Verse is in the lineup, if Pat Payton's in the lineup. how old is Fisk? He's got to be like 22, right? I mean, class was he? He looks older.
Yeah.
To me. What's his birthday? They don't do birthdays. Yeah, born January 18, 2000. So this guy's been 23 for almost the whole year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, basically the entire year. Yeah, that's a grown man who understands technique, does have good get off, and is able to help you out, I think, in a lot of ways, who is probably going to get single blocked quite often.
Mm-hmm.
That's helpful, right? By the way, yes, I agree with you. LSU's offensive line, if I had to pick an offensive line that had the best chance of holding up against this defensive front, it's the opening game offensive line. I mean, they both, I think this defensive front has a number of NFL players, and I'm pretty damn sure LSU's offensive front does too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if we got a pass rusher, got a couple other good guys. Do we need to talk Jackson here?
Let's talk Jackson. So it will be very interesting to see how this plays out. There is no, I want to stress, there's no inside info here because there's no inside info to give from a FSU perspective or anything else. I will say, as someone that is familiar with the NIL landscape, and when I mention that in this reference, I mean politically, that you can watch some of the things going on, and it wouldn't shock me if, and I'm not speaking specific to Jackson here, wouldn't shock me if maybe all of these waivers that were requested before the rule, I don't want to say the rule was changed, but the rule seemed to be interpreted a little bit
The
differently.
clarification was handed down?
Yeah, clarification and intent to enforce said rule with a little bit more consistency and intent. I'm saying there's a chance that all of those guys might get cleared based off what is transpiring in front of us. Some of the politics of NIL, meaning an NCAA president that needs broader support to push some of the things that he's trying through the federal landscape. Don't go on a message board and tell you that that I said Daryl Jackson's getting cleared, whatever. But I'm telling you, when I look at the chess pieces, so to say, yeah, I would not surprise me at all if everybody who was in before that clarification ends up getting their waiver upheld or granted. Yeah, we'll go with granted, the more simple of the terms. But yeah,
I mean, look, it sort of calls the question. Why are you needing to issue a clarification if you're claiming, if you, the NCAA, is claiming that this has been the rule the whole time and this is always how you've done it? You're issuing a clarification because you know that the way your organization acted for the last 3 years was to essentially grant these no matter what, right? Very,
somewhere
very
between a
deep
70 and 85% clip if you look at them over the past couple of years.
And basically any kid who was going to a big time school could get an attorney and they would basically roll over. Now, this is not like totally ex post facto because the rule was always the rule, but I do think it's sort of ex post facto in like the clarification being handed down after these kids had transferred and enrolled is sort of ridiculous. And for the NCAA, like, wait a second, so we can maybe get some political capital and maybe get your vote on something. If you notice, I mean, DeSantis is out there, Rubio's out there, North Carolina's governor is out there. I wouldn't be shocked if Arizona, because I think both state and the Wildcats are waiting on a waiver player. Like if those maybe their presidents can lean on the governor or a senator out there or something. You know, if you're an NCAA, like, so we can avoid a PR disaster or at least avoid extending one, and then we get some votes. That's kind of a win-win. Like, oh no, don't help me avoid a PR disaster here. Also, I mean, dude, if you think about this, there are cases that are a little more that will play worse in the public for the NCAA than just the DJ case, right? Tez, you're muted.
Yep.
Tez Walker at
Chapel Hill.
at North Carolina. His first transfer was because his school that he was at, which was an FCS school, so 1AA, their season was canceled due to COVID. I mean, that's kind of not really going to work if you're doing NCAA. And the other one, there's one that has alleged religious discrimination. So, look, I mean, I'm not guaranteeing that these guys are going to be eligible. Daryl Jackson, if he is eligible, does have a significant chance to be Florida State's best interior defensive lineman. It would be a significant impact, particularly in the biggest of games that you want to play, right? Miami, Florida, it probably makes Clemson chuck the ball around more. If he plays, you could make LSU a little more one-dimensional because of his ability to be an absolute clogger in the middle and just be huge. I mean, he's enormous, and he's not super consistent, but the best stuff he has is really good. It's like that closer in baseball, man. If he comes out there and he's throwing strikes at all, you are done because like the stuff is just not really hittable. That's kind of what he's got in stopping the run game, like to my eye at least. I hope this guy gets eligible because I am excited to see what he can do, and it definitely changes your defense some, especially with how much too high you want to have. I mean, if he can two gap, that's a big deal because I don't know that you have a great two gapper right now. I think you got a lot of guys who may be passable two gappers, but if you got a great one, or a guy who has the ability to give you some great two-gap snaps, maybe not every snap, that does change what you could do.
Yeah. Josh Farmer, after putting on...
Oh, we forgot to talk Fabo.
Yeah.
I mean, a guy who came back, I know he considered the draft, and dude who has a lot of ability when healthy. I mean, like last year, I don't think he was fully healthy for part of the year, right? I think that's fairly well known at this point. Gave you 470 snaps, and 5 tackles for loss, 12 run stops, pretty good stop rate. Like, this is another guy who is an upper tier defensive tackle when healthy in the ACC. Like I mean, if Jackson doesn't get cleared, I think it's healthy Fabo and Fisk probably.
Yeah.
You know,
healthy Fabo is your starting defense tackle. Absolutely. Something to be really excited about. All sorts of different numbers out there last year when you look at defense with Fabo, defense without Fabo. Fabian Lovett, he's we know what he is. He's a pretty damn good football player when he goes out there. And look forward to seeing what that looks like. Josh Farmer put on some real good weight. Josh Farmer, ready to have a pretty explosive year, maybe somewhat similar to Pat Payton, although Payton will be starting. Farmer, I think, this is the year to make a jump. Next year's the year to, if you're trying to launch yourself into for Josh, what I would say maybe the first 50 picks in the NFL draft or something like that. That's a 2024 project, but 2023 I think is the year that much more of the college football landscape starts to become familiar with Josh Farmer. A guy who, hey, look, not going to give away any strategy. I'm not sure I have one. Josh Farmer snap count draft. He could take 285. He could take 585. I mean, Josh Farmer may have as much variance at the defensive tackle position as anybody that we're going to talk about as far as how many snaps he could take. Part of that's some of the questions, otherwise found at the defensive line position. But I think Farmer is going to really, really surprise people. He's set himself up well for a year, and I would expect him to have that type of year.
If Jackson can't go, I mean, you need Lovett, but you also, you need you need Farmer to be able to do some two gap stuff, to be able to be a good run defender for you. Like, I don't know if he's going to be an elite pass rusher, but you don't really need to do that. Like, you need to be a consistently reliable guy in the middle to use his strength and use the bulk that he's put on in order to stop the run. Man, we are running a little bit long on this. All right.
It's basically 2 position groups.
That is true.
This one's going to be our longest one. You're talking about a lot of players. So
Linebacker will not be as long. Yeah, DB won't be as long.
Linebacker won't. It
You
also won't
look,
be from the bar at my bachelor party, so, you can expect a little bit more detailed conversation as opposed to last year's linebacker preview. Yeah, Ayo Tafasi, really strong, physically gifted kid, a guy that's going to probably be sprinkled in the rotation some. Excited to see what he looks like. State champion wrestler, Bud, as a sophomore at heavyweight. First year he ever wrestled, then never wrestled again. So, it's good to just do it once, go out on top. That's my kind of style there.
that is an awesome note by you there. I like that. Also, Malcolm Ray still around on the roster, a guy who, sneaky 333 snaps
A lot of snaps last year. Yeah.
Daniel Lyons, guy who I think could get some interesting play for you this year. I'm excited to see him. Other than that, you didn't lose anybody. Like Bishop Thomas is at Colorado, and he really couldn't get on the field. Chambray is, I'm not really sure. He couldn't get on the field. So, yeah, I'm very excited to watch this group. If Florida State gets to its ultimate goals this year, it's almost assuredly because this broke right. You need to run good here on D-line. You need guys to play to their ceilings. You probably need the waiver to be granted, and you need to stay healthy. And I'm hoping that they can, because it's going to be a really fun group to watch.
Feel like these have been very positive, very fun position previews. This one right there with it. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, congruityhr.com, the legendary home loan team of Shannon and Chad. I believe 500 and teens Nolecast listeners have now gotten a loan through those gentlemen, and there's a damn good reason for it. 844 FSU loan. And finally, our friend Matt Thompson and his team at Madison Social. Again, join us for the tailgate that they are doing for the LSU game. LaborDayTailgate.com is the website, and we hope to see as many of y'all out there that can possibly make it. But we'll be back. We'll do linebackers next. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Nolecast.
Yes, sir.